So in today's video, we're going to test out the i5-8400 and also the i5-8600K, and we're going to overclock that, compare it against an overclocked 8700K and a Ryzen 7 1800X in a variety of games. And we'll also do some productivity benchmarks to see how good the i5s stack up against the best out there. Welcome back to Tech Yes City. This is Brian coming to you guys today with some more benchmarks on the two 6-core i5 variants. Now these were released into the wild with the i7-8700K. However, the 8700K kind of stole the show with it being the 6-core, 12-threaded CPU that could get to 5 GHz and was on the mainstream Z370 chipset. Of course, however, the 8600K does raise a good proposition, and now we'll talk about the overclocks later in the video, where on average the 6-core 6-threaded 8600K is rumored to overclock higher than the 8700K. And we've also got the most interesting of the bunch, the i5-8400, which turbos up to 3.8 GHz on all 6 cores. Out of the box, comes included with the cooler and costs $180. However, before we talk more about these CPUs, let's roll all the benchmarks and paint that picture. So today's benchmark rig consists of the MSI Gaming Pro Carbon. Really good motherboard if all you want to do is get into overclocking, and things are very simple in the BIOS. Great for beginners, and you will get extremely good results too. And also we're using the Galax GTX 1080 Ti and of course the 3 different Coffee Lake CPUs and the 1800X. Though with the 8400 I decided to drop the memory speeds down to 2666 megahertz. So as you can see in those benchmarks, both the i5-8400 and the 8600K were doing extremely well in games. Now keep in mind, this is with the GTX 1080 Ti, which is practically the best gaming graphics card you can get out there at the moment. So if you do get a card like a GTX 1070 or a Vega 56 or something like that, the differences will become less and less. So going with any kind of the CPUs that I've shown here today won't cause a problem for games. And even then, even with a 1080 Ti, there's not much of a difference. What it comes down to though is, especially if you're a competitive gamer, and hence why I do test those competitive titles, and you want the best FPS, then you're probably going to be honestly looking at an 8600K. That was performing extremely well at 5 GHz, and I was really surprised when I put this in and overclocked it. The first time I overclocked, I got stability. I've never had that before. 5 GHz, 1.33 volt. It just locked in and it was running perfectly fine. And the funny thing was, it was using a lot less power than the 8700K. Now keep in mind, I do have to do more testing on this just to say with certainty that the 8600K on average will overclock high, because I could have a good sample for the 8600K, bad sample for the 8700K. But what I'm seeing here is that the 6 extra threads coupled with that small die size on the mainstream CPUs is allowing this time around the 8600K to use less power. And so with that, before the heat can dissipate to the IHS, the 8600K is allowed to go higher because of that. So if this is kind of making any sense, basically what I'm trying to say is that my CPU, the 8600K here, overclocked to 5.2 GHz with ease, but the 8700K could only go up to 5 GHz. And now both these CPUs were delidded, and of course you will see a temperature drop both on the 8600K delidded versus the 8700K. But also on that note, the 8600K, if you don't want a D-lid, it will go to 5 GHz stable. I'd say most of these 8600Ks will do a fine job of doing that. So now let's focus on the games themselves. And first up, we've got PUBG. Now, I will remove the cap in future testing when I rerun all my benchmarks, but for now, what we could see was the 8600K was neck and neck with the 8700K, and also the 8400 was performing really well as well in this title. The 1.1% lows were doing extremely well on all these 3 CPUs on the Coffee Lake lineup. The 1800X was doing really well too. And also on that note, if you're streaming in this title, there won't be much of a difference. Now, a lot of people seem to think that streaming is extremely intensive on your computer. The only thing that I've found it to be really intensive on is your disks, especially if you're constantly copying over to those disks. So make sure you get a good SSD if you want to stream. But otherwise, the CPU and the GPU itself, I noticed not much of a difference when I stream with XSplit, and that's why I use XSplit, because it's so simple and easy to use, and the output picture in itself is really good in the end. But what about Dota 2? When we look at this title, we saw a difference again that scaled similar to PUBG. And I thought it was just a really good experience on all 4 CPUs. Of course, if you're looking for that edge, then the 8600K is going to give it to you. The 8700K, of course, will do the same thing, except it's wasted money if you're a professional Dota 2 player. But moving over to CSGO, this was an interesting title because the 8700K did win by quite a bit here. And I did see this when I was playing some matches after I ran the benchmark. So the 8700K is kind of like the king of CSGO if you need the best FPS possible. And what I did was, of course, I test these titles at 1080p, high settings, because I don't want to stress the GPU 100%. And I'm sure that's what competitive gamers would want. They want to be stressing their CPU so they can get the most frame rates possible. But of course, moving on to some of the other titles, the Ubisoft titles, they were all doing really well on all 4 of these CPUs. I was surprised the 8400 was kicking it really hard. It was performing exactly the same as the 8600K and 8700K a lot of the times. And one benchmark I will point out here is the Far Cry Primal benchmark, where the 8600K beat the 8700K. So this is kind of one of those things where maybe having hyperthreading disabled helps it. And it was a 4 FPS difference, which although you could put down a margin of error, I did run it a few times and this is the numbers it was spitting out. Though the last gaming benchmark I want to pull up for you guys is the F1 2016 4K results. And I probably will be pulling up something similar to this in every single CPU gaming benchmark result that I do. Because at the end of the day, if all you're looking for is an end user great graphical experience, especially at 4K, then it doesn't really matter what CPU you use. I mean, you could probably get away with an i3 even, and you won't notice a difference. Though what we saw here today with the 4 CPUs on display was that there was practically no difference at 4K. So the differences we're showing at 1080p again is mainly for those people concerned with getting the utmost highest FPS, whether you're on a 240Hz monitor or you're a competitive gamer playing for cash. Although the gaming benchmarks and the i5s is the main point of today's video, I also threw in some productivity benchmarks, and I was really surprised by both what the 8400 and the 8600K were pulling off. The 8600K overclocked handed a victory to the 1800X in Premiere Pro. Now, Premiere Pro, of course, after you go after 12 threads, I believe, it starts to scale down and it doesn't utilize all those 16 threads, for example, properly. And so this allowed the 8600K to score that victory. But Adobe Audition, single threaded performance there. So these are the kind of like the 2 benchmarks for me personally that I use a lot. So it's more relative to what I do. But when we look at other benchmarks like POV Ray and also things like Cinebench and 7-Zip, the 1800X is doing really well. So now it's conclusion time, and I want to sum up mainly what the i5-8400 and 8600K are about, and they are those relevant 6-core, 6-threaded gaming CPUs. The 8600K if you want that edge, if you're looking for the best FPS, and the 8400 if you're on a budget. Though with the budget thing, it's kind of tricky at the moment because there's only Z370 chipsets available, and to further complicate things, someone at Asus announced that they could get a Z270 board working with the new Coffee Lake chips. And if that's so, then it kind of debunks Intel's claims that they had to change the socket around for power delivery. And with that, if a Z270 will work, then a H110 and B150 and B250s could technically work with an i5-8400. And if this is in fact the certain truth, then man, Intel, what are you guys doing? I mean, just hit after hit. I don't know really what to say, but We're gonna just focus on the 8400 and the 8600K for what they are right now. And that's that they're really good gaming CPUs. If you're looking for a CPU and you can get the Z370 chipset and you can get a decent cooling solution, then the 8600K will be a great solution. I think you don't have to go out and spend as much on a Z370 motherboard and cooler as you would if you wanted to buy the 8700K. So that is the benefit of the 8600K. Not only is the CPU cheaper, but you will get away with a entry-level Z370 and also a cheaper cooler, because it was using around 90 watts at 5 gigahertz, which was impressive thermal draw. And now the 8400 with the thermal draw, people are like, okay, why are they advertising 2.8 gigahertz on the 8400? It's kind of confusing because it goes up to 3.8 gigahertz on all cores. And that's mainly in Intel's defense, is the AVX instruction set. That does juice a lot more power and put a lot more strain on the CPU. So technically they have to advertise that 2.8 gigahertz base, because if they didn't and AVX instructions ran on a slower speed, for instance, if it ran at 2.8 gigahertz and they advertised 3.8 gigahertz, then they could be up for some legal action or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, besides the whole Z370 only being released and also the limited supply situation with these CPUs, when they do get back in stock and when the B360 motherboards hit and the H310s, then the 8400 is going to be a great buy. At its current price, it's good, except with a Z370 motherboard, it does start to lose its appeal, especially compared to something like a B350 and Ryzen 5 1600. Though the 8600K, that's very solid if you want to couple that with a Z370 Pro 4, for example, from Asrock. Really good combination. And yes, with the stocks, I did manage to get 2 8400 retail samples. I bought one from my local retailer, also got one delivered from Amazon.com. And I didn't really like go on any waiting lists. I just saw them available. I was like, hey, I'll get them because I want to use them. And if you enjoyed today's video, then be sure to hit that like button and let me know in the comments section below, do you like coffee? Coffee Lake. If so, why? If not, why not? Of course, the why nots are a pretty strong argument and I'm not going to argue against that. And I'll catch you guys in another tech video very soon. There's a used build going to hit the channel very soon. Also, if you want to check out my 8700K review, then I'll put the links in the description below. And also with the overclocks, the 8600K versus the 8700K, I'll probably do a separate video later on once there's more data out there. It's really preliminary, early results, but it is looking like the 8600K on average will overclock higher than the 8700K, which technically would make it a better gaming CPU. Anyway guys, I'll catch you in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.